The sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled our cozy living room as we wrapped up another successful webinar. Ali and I had built our online courses on family counseling from the ground up, and tonight's session had been no different. We had hundreds of viewers, all eagerly taking notes on how to improve their relationships. But as I glanced at Ali, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. For weeks now, I had noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She spent more time in the office with our assistant, Paul. Their banter, once innocent, had taken on a tone I couldn't quite put my finger on. I brushed it off initially, chalking it up to my overactive imagination. But when I stumbled across their text messages one evening, my heart sank. There it was, the unmistakable evidence of an affair. Flirty emojis and late-night exchanges that hinted at more than just professional camaraderie. I felt the ground beneath me shift. I had dedicated my life to teaching others about love, trust, and commitment. Yet here I was, betrayed by the person I thought I knew best. Rather than confront her right away, a darker impulse surged within me. What if I could use our platform to expose her? The next day, as I sat down to prepare for our upcoming session, a twisted plan began to form. I decided to address the topic of infidelity in a way that would hit home, not just for my audience, but for Ali herself. When the time for the webinar arrived, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. I opened with a warm welcome, the usual pleasantries pouring out of my mouth. But as the session progressed, I felt the tension building. I could see the curiosity in the eyes of our viewers, their anticipation palpable. Tonight, I want to share a story about betrayal, I said, injecting my voice with an air of sincerity. This is a real-life account of a couple I know well. I paused, letting my words hang in the air. A couple that had everything, a thriving career, a loving relationship. But then, the wife strayed. As I detailed the unfolding story, describing the betrayal in vivid detail, I glanced at Ali. Her face blanched, disbelief flashing in her eyes. The room was silent except for the tapping of keyboards as students began to take notes. I could feel their shock radiating outwards. They were entranced. I continued, weaving in details that only Ali and I shared, the late nights, the whispers, the secrets. Each revelation was like a dagger, piercing through the facade of our perfect life. In the other room, I could sense her spiraling. I watched as her face shifted from shock to anger, and finally to despair. Imagine discovering that the person you trust the most is capable of such deceit, I said, my voice steady. What do you do when the foundation of your life crumbles beneath you? The students were engaged, murmurs of disbelief rippling through the group. It was the reaction I had anticipated: shock, pity, judgment. But more importantly, it was the justice I craved. As the session drew to a close, I could see the impact my words had made. Ali was no longer the revered expert in the eyes of our students. She had become the subject of their discussions, a cautionary tale of betrayal. And as I signed off, I felt a bittersweet satisfaction. Yes, I had orchestrated this moment, but it came at a cost. I was losing her, this I knew. But at that moment, the thrill of revenge overshadowed everything else. Little did I know, the fallout was only beginning. After the webinar ended, the atmosphere in our house shifted. What had been a space filled with laughter and warmth now felt cold and tense. I expected Ali to confront me, to demand an explanation for what I had done. Instead, she sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the ground as if she were trying to shrink into herself. Ali, we need to talk, I finally said, breaking the suffocating silence. She looked up, her expression a mix of hurt and anger. Talk about what? You just shared our private life with hundreds of people. How could you do that? I felt a rush of anger at her defensiveness. How could you betray me, Ali? You think I wanted this? You put me in this position. Her face paled, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. It just happened. Just happened? I echoed, incredulous. You're a family counselor. You know better than anyone how this can destroy trust. She shot up from her chair, her hands trembling. And what about you? Do you think this little stunt is going to help us? It's humiliating. As the argument escalated, I could feel the weight of our crumbling relationship pressing down on me. I had wanted to expose her, but I hadn't anticipated how much it would hurt me too. But the thrill of having taken control, of having turned the tables, was intoxicating. Over the next few days, the fallout from the webinar continued to ripple through our lives. Students flooded our online forums with questions and comments. Some were supportive, while others were ruthless, questioning how Allie could preach about love and fidelity after what had transpired. "Did you hear what happened to Allie?" one of our former students wrote in the group chat. "I can't believe she would cheat. What a hypocrite." I could feel a sense of vindication each time I read those messages. My plan was working, but it wasn't long before I noticed that our online courses were suffering. Enrollment numbers plummeted, and cancellations began to roll in. People weren't just losing faith in Allie, they were losing faith in our entire brand. In the midst of this chaos, Allie proposed an idea. "What if we host a special webinar about rebuilding trust? We can use this as a way to educate others about the consequences of infidelity." I shook my head, feeling a surge of resentment. "You think people will want to hear from you after all this? You've lost your credibility, Allie." She fell silent again, the hurt evident in her eyes. "But I can't just give up. We built this together, John. Maybe you should have thought about that before you cheated," I snapped. Days turned into weeks, and our home became a battleground of unspoken words and buried feelings. Each meal felt like a chore, and each passing day deepened the chasm between us. Our once harmonious life had transformed into a series of awkward encounters and cold exchanges. As the students continued to discuss Allie's betrayal, I found myself losing interest in the very courses we had created together. The joy I once found in helping couples heal was overshadowed by the bitterness of my own situation. I had sought revenge, but it was costing me everything I had once cherished. One evening, as I was scrolling through social media, I came across a post from one of our students. "This is why you shouldn't trust family counselors," it read. "They're just as flawed as everyone else." The weight of that statement hit me hard. I realized that Allie's actions had consequences that extended beyond just our marriage. Our entire community was affected, and I felt the burden of responsibility for what had unfolded. It was then that I knew I had to make a choice. I could either let this consume me, or I could find a way to rise above it. But could I truly forgive Allie? Would we ever find a path back to each other? As I sat in the silence of our home, I realized I had a long road ahead. The road to healing wouldn't just be about fixing our marriage, it would be about finding a way to forgive and rebuild the shattered pieces of our lives. The days dragged on, each one feeling heavier than the last. I was still reeling from the chaos our lives had become. Our once thriving online courses now seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by scandal and betrayal. Every time I thought about the webinars, the vibrant discussions we used to have, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Allie and I were existing in the same space, but we were miles apart. I could see the weight of shame on her shoulders, the way she flinched at every little thing I said. One evening, she approached me while I was sitting on the couch, my mind lost in a haze of frustration and resentment. "John," she started, her voice shaky. "I want to try to make this right. I think we need to talk to someone, a therapist." I looked up, surprised. "You want to go to therapy? After what you did?" "Yes," she said, her gaze steadying. "I know I messed up, but I don't want to throw everything away. I still love you. I want to understand why this happened." I took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to refuse, to wallow in my anger and hurt. But another part recognized the flicker of hope in her words. "Okay," I said reluctantly. "Let's find someone." We made an appointment with a therapist specializing in infidelity. The days leading up to our first session were fraught with tension. I kept replaying the past in my mind, trying to pinpoint where things had gone wrong. When the day of our session arrived, we sat in the therapist's office, the atmosphere thick with unease. The therapist, a kind-looking woman named Dr. Harris, welcomed us with a warm smile. "Let's start by talking about how you both feel," she suggested. Allie took a deep breath. "I feel ashamed. I never intended to hurt John, and I don't know why I made such a terrible choice." I shifted in my seat, trying to keep my expression neutral. "I don't know how to trust you anymore. I feel like I don't even know who you are." Dr. Harris nodded, encouraging us to express our feelings without judgment. As we spoke, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me: anger, sadness, confusion. But as Allie shared her regrets, I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. It was a reminder of the love we once shared, the connection that had drawn us together in the first place. "Infidelity often stems from unmet needs," Dr. Harris explained. "It's crucial to explore what may have been lacking in your relationship before this happened." Allie looked at me earnestly. I think I was feeling overwhelmed with everything: the courses, the pressure to be perfect. I thought I could escape it for a moment. Escape? I echoed, feeling the sting of betrayal resurface. You thought cheating was the answer? I know it wasn't, she replied, her voice trembling. I was foolish and selfish. But I want to understand how we can move forward. As the session continued, I found myself reluctantly engaging in the discussion. Dr. Harris guided us through exercises that forced us to confront our feelings and needs. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a glimmer of understanding, a crack in the wall I had built around my heart. After several sessions, I could see a shift in Allie. She was working hard to be open and honest, even about the hardest topics. The shame that once clouded her eyes was giving way to determination. She wanted to rebuild, and part of me wanted to let her. But doubt still lingered. As we began to navigate the difficult waters of rebuilding trust, I noticed that Allie was making an effort to communicate more openly with me. She shared her fears and insecurities, and I found myself doing the same. It wasn't easy, but with each session, we were slowly peeling back the layers of our relationship. But just as I began to entertain the possibility of forgiveness, I received a message from one of our former students. I just heard Allie's story shared at a different seminar, it read. People are still talking about her affair. Is it really over for you too? The message hit me like a punch to the gut. I realized that no matter how hard we worked to heal, the shadow of her betrayal loomed large in the eyes of others. Would we ever escape it? As I stared at the screen, my heart raced. I was torn between the desire to move forward and the weight of judgment from our community. I needed to talk to Allie about this, but I also feared it would reopen old wounds. That evening, after our session, I gathered my courage and approached her. We need to talk about the message I received. People aren't letting this go. Allie's expression shifted to one of worry. I know. I've been feeling the weight of it, too. But we can't let others dictate our healing. We have to focus on us. Her determination was palpable, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in the eyes of our community. I wanted to believe we could rebuild, but the road ahead felt longer and more daunting than ever. As we sat together, I realized that the journey toward healing would require not only confronting the past but also finding a way to redefine our future, even in the face of judgment. As the days turned into weeks, Allie and I continued our therapy sessions, navigating the complex emotions that lingered between us. But outside our small bubble of progress, the reality of our situation loomed larger than ever. The online community we had built together was becoming increasingly vocal about Allie's affair, and each new post I encountered felt like a fresh wound. One evening, I logged into our forum to check for updates, only to find threads buzzing with speculation. Is Allie really sorry? One user questioned. Can they really recover from this? Another chimed in. The negativity was suffocating, and it felt as if we were living under a microscope. Have you seen what people are saying? I asked Allie, my voice tight with frustration. She nodded, her expression pained. I can't escape it. I wish I could just erase what happened, but it's like a shadow that follows me everywhere. I knew she was right, but the judgment felt unbearable. They don't know the full story. They're just making assumptions. Maybe they're right to question me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I gave them a reason to doubt. Her words hung in the air, heavy with guilt and regret. I wanted to defend her, to tell her that we were working on things, but I couldn't help feeling the sting of their criticism, too. That weekend, we attended a local seminar on rebuilding trust after infidelity, hoping to gather some insights and connect with others who had faced similar challenges. As we walked into the packed room, I could sense the tension between us. I wasn't sure if we were there to learn or to face more judgment. As the speaker began, he shared his own story of betrayal and forgiveness. The audience was captivated, and I could feel Allie's body tense beside me. I watched as she hung on every word, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. When the session ended, participants were encouraged to share their experiences. I braced myself as Allie stood up, taking a deep breath before speaking. I'd like to share something, she said, her voice steady but laced with vulnerability. I've struggled with infidelity, and I know how deeply it hurts. I'm working on rebuilding trust with my husband, and I'm committed to learning from my mistakes. The room fell silent, eyes turned toward her, some sympathetic, others skeptical. I could feel the weight of their gaze, the judgments swirling in the air. Afterward, a few people approached us, offering their support, but others were less kind. You really think you can fix this? One woman scoffed. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Quote dot. That stung. I watched as Allie's face fell, the judgment cutting deeper than I could have imagined. You don't know the whole story, I said, stepping in defensively. The woman shrugged. But I know enough. Infidelity leaves scars that don't heal. As we left the seminar, the weight of the day pressed down on us. Allie was quiet, her usual spark dimmed by the encounter. I could see the doubt creeping back into her eyes, and it broke my heart. Allie, you can't let what others say dictate how you feel about yourself, I said, trying to reassure her. But they're right, she replied, her voice trembling. I hurt you. I hurt so many people who trusted me. How can I expect them to believe I can change? I pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. We're working on this together. That's what matters. We can't control what they think, but we can control our actions moving forward. That night, we talked late into the evening, both of us feeling the burden of our choices. I shared my fears about our reputation, about how the community's judgment felt like a weight on our shoulders. Allie opened up about her shame and guilt, and I realized that beneath the anger, we both wanted the same thing, to rebuild and heal. As the weeks turned into months, we began to find a new rhythm. Our therapy sessions became a safe haven where we could unpack our feelings without judgment. Slowly, I could see Allie's determination to change take shape. She was committed to not just repairing our marriage but also redefining her role in the community. One day, she suggested we host a webinar on rebuilding trust, this time focusing on her experience and the lessons she had learned. It might help others who are struggling, she proposed. I hesitated, unsure if putting her back in the spotlight was the right move. What if they just attack you again? I have to face this, she insisted. I need to own my mistakes and show people that change is possible. After much discussion, I agreed. We spent weeks preparing, crafting a presentation that highlighted not only her journey but also the importance of accountability and forgiveness in relationships. When the day of the webinar arrived, I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. As we sat in front of the camera, I could see the determination in Allie's eyes. She was ready to face the world again, and I was proud of her courage. As she began to share her story, I watched the comments roll in, some supportive, others still skeptical. But what mattered most was that we were doing this together. It was a step toward not only her redemption but our healing as well. By the end of the session, the responses were overwhelmingly positive. Viewers praised her vulnerability and honesty, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could turn the tide on our community's judgment. As we signed off, Allie turned to me, her eyes shining. Thank you for standing by me, for believing I could do this. I smiled, realizing that our journey was far from over, but we were finally taking steps in the right direction. Together, we could face whatever came next. The weeks following our webinar felt like a turning point. Allie's courage had begun to shift perceptions within our community, and I sensed a renewed interest in our courses. People were reaching out with words of encouragement, sharing their own stories of overcoming betrayal. It was heartening to see the support, yet I knew we still had much work to do. Despite the positive feedback, I couldn't shake the unease that lingered in the back of my mind. Allie and I were rebuilding, yes, but the specter of her affair still loomed large. I found myself replaying the events in my mind, questioning the moments that had led us here. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, I sat on the couch, lost in thought. Allie joined me, sensing my turmoil. What's on your mind? She asked gently. I can't help but wonder about the time before everything fell apart. Was I really blind to the signs? How did I not see this coming? Allie looked down, her expression pained. I don't know, John. I wish I had been more open with you about how I was feeling. I got caught up in the pressure and lost sight of what mattered. It's not just on you. I should have noticed something was off. We were supposed to be a team, I replied, frustration bubbling to the surface. I know, and I'm sorry for that, she said softly. But I can't keep looking back. We need to confront this, not just dwell on it. Her words resonated with me. We had to face the past, to understand what had led us to this point, and how we could truly move forward. That weekend, we decided to take a different approach. We set aside time for a relationship review, a concept we often suggested to our clients. We gathered some snacks, a bottle of wine, and settled in for what would be an emotional evening. Let's start with the good, Allie said, her voice steady. What are the moments we cherish in our relationship? We took turns sharing our favorite memories, laughing and reminiscing. From our first date to the night we launched our courses, each story rekindled the warmth between us. It was a reminder of the love that still existed beneath the pain. As the night wore on, we shifted to the more difficult topics. What went wrong? I asked, my heart racing at the thought of confronting the deeper issues. Ali sighed, her face thoughtful. I think we lost sight of each other. We got so caught up in our work, in maintaining an image of perfection, that we forgot to communicate. I felt overwhelmed and didn't know how to express it. I felt that pressure too, I admitted. But I thought we were in it together. I didn't realize you were struggling until it was too late. We continued to explore the emotions and decisions that had led us to this moment. It was painful, but it was also liberating. We uncovered layers of resentment and fear that had built up over time, the unspoken words that had festered beneath the surface. As we dug deeper, we both acknowledged our fears. I was terrified of failure, Ali confessed. Of letting you down, of disappointing our audience. I thought I could escape those feelings, but it only made things worse. And I was scared of losing you, I replied, the vulnerability of the moment catching me off guard. I thought I could keep everything together, but I was drowning too. The honesty between us felt like a breath of fresh air. With each revelation, I could sense the weight lifting off our shoulders. We were no longer just victims of our circumstances, we were partners, working through the mess together. As the evening drew to a close, we reached a place of understanding. This is going to take time, I said softly. But I believe we can do this. We can rebuild trust. Ali nodded, her eyes glistening. I want that too. I know I have to earn back your trust, and I'm committed to doing whatever it takes. In that moment, I realized that while the journey ahead would be challenging, we were finally taking the necessary steps toward healing. Together, we could confront our past, learn from it, and build a stronger future. But just as we began to feel a sense of hope, a message came through on my phone, interrupting our moment. It was from Paul, our former assistant. Hey, I've been hearing things about you too. How's everything going? My heart sank at the thought of Paul. I knew he had been a part of our struggles, and I felt a mix of anger and resentment toward him. Ali must have sensed my tension because she placed her hand on my arm. Do you want to respond? She asked quietly. I took a deep breath, weighing my options. No, not right now. I think we need to focus on us. But I can't ignore the fact that he was a part of all this. Ali nodded. I understand, but we can't let him interfere with our progress. We need to keep our boundaries strong. Her support was reassuring, and I felt a renewed sense of determination. The past was messy, but we were ready to confront it, to learn from it, and to protect what we were building together. As we turned off the lights and headed to bed, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. We were moving forward, and for the first time in months, I could see a glimmer of a future where we could be whole again. Life continued to unfold with its usual rhythm, but the air between Ali and me felt lighter, filled with a newfound sense of hope. We dedicated more time to each other, exploring hobbies we had long neglected. We rediscovered the joy in cooking together, hiking, and even binging old sitcoms on the couch. It was a welcome distraction from the chaos of the past. One Saturday, we decided to attend a local farmers market, eager to enjoy the vibrant atmosphere and fresh produce. As we strolled through the stalls, holding hands and laughing, it felt like a new chapter was beginning. That's when I saw him, Paul. He was standing by a booth, chatting with a couple of friends, looking relaxed and carefree. My stomach twisted at the sight. I hadn't thought much about him since our last conversation, but seeing him in person triggered a mix of emotions. John, Ali said, noticing my sudden tension. Are you okay? I swallowed hard. Yeah, I didn't expect to see him here. Do you want to leave? She asked, concern etched on her face. No, let's stay. I don't want to let him dictate our day, I replied, trying to sound confident. We continued to browse the market, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. As we approached a stall selling fresh flowers, I glanced over and saw Paul walking toward us, a smile on his face. Hey, John, Ali, good to see you, he called out, as if nothing had happened. Hi, Paul, I managed, my voice tight. Ali greeted him with a forced smile, and for a moment, it felt like we were all stuck in a strange time warp. The awkwardness was palpable. What have you guys been up to? Paul asked, his tone casual, as if we hadn't just weathered a storm together. I glanced at Ali, searching for a cue on how to respond. We've been busy working on our courses and spending time together, I said. Keeping my tone neutral, Paul nodded, seemingly unfazed. That's great. I've heard some good things about your recent webinar. It seems like you're both getting back on track. Allie's expression flickered, a mix of gratitude and resentment. Thanks, Paul. We're trying to move forward, she said, her voice steady. There was a moment of silence, and I could feel the tension building. I knew I couldn't let this encounter pass without addressing the elephant in the room. Paul, can we talk for a second? I asked, my voice firm. Sure, man, he replied, looking a bit taken aback. I gestured toward a quieter corner of the market, away from Allie. Once we were out of earshot, I turned to him. I just want to be clear about something. Your role in our lives has changed. I don't want any more unnecessary complications. He raised his hands defensively. I get it, John. I really do. I never meant to come between you two. I just thought. Thought what? I interrupted. That it would be okay to cross lines? To put our work and marriage at risk? He looked away, shame creeping into his expression. I messed up. I realize that now. I just got caught up in everything. I never wanted to hurt either of you. The sincerity in his voice surprised me. Well, it happened, and it had real consequences. We're trying to rebuild our lives. I need you to respect that. Of course, he replied, his tone earnest. I'll step back. I just wanted to apologize to both of you. I can't change what happened, but I can give you space. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of our conversation. Just know that it's going to take time for us to heal. I hope you understand. I do, he said quietly. And I hope you both find your way back to each other. As I walked back to Allie, I felt a strange mix of relief and lingering resentment. The encounter had forced me to confront the past, but it had also left me with questions. Would we ever fully escape the shadows he cast on our lives? Allie met me with a worried look. How did it go? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. He said he understands and wants to give us space. I think he really feels remorseful. Her expression softened. I hope he does. But we need to focus on us now. We spent the rest of the day wandering through the market, picking up fresh vegetables and flowers, but the encounter lingered in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that while we were making progress, the past still had a grip on us, and it was something we needed to confront together. As we returned home, the atmosphere felt a bit heavier. I could see Allie was lost in thought, her brows furrowed. What are you thinking? I asked, trying to break the silence. I don't know. I just keep wondering if we'll ever truly move past this, she admitted. I want to believe we can, but sometimes it feels so daunting. I took her hand, squeezing it gently. We're doing the work, Allie. It's going to take time, but we're in this together. She smiled weakly, and for a moment, I saw the spark of hope that had fueled our journey. But I also recognized that the road ahead was still filled with challenges. We had to confront not just our relationship but also the remnants of the past that threatened to pull us back. That night, as we settled into bed, I turned to her. No matter what happens, I want you to know that I believe in us. Me too, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And as we drifted off to sleep, I held on to that belief, hoping it would be enough to guide us through the uncertainties that lay ahead. As the weeks rolled on, life began to feel somewhat normal again. Allie and I had settled into a routine of therapy, working on our courses, and spending quality time together. The clouds of judgment from our community started to dissipate, replaced by supportive messages from those who genuinely cared about our growth. It was a welcome change, but beneath the surface, the tension still simmered. One evening, I was reviewing the latest course materials while Allie cooked dinner. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced at it and froze. A message from a former student read, "Did you see the blog post about Allie? It's not pretty." My stomach dropped. I quickly clicked on the link, my heart racing. The title screamed, "Infidelity and Its Consequences, a Cautionary Tale." The post detailed Allie's affair, painting her in a light that was both sensational and cruel. It dredged up all the pain I thought we were moving past. "Allie," I shouted, my voice filled with urgency. She rushed into the room, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's wrong?" I turned the screen toward her, watching her face fall as she read the words. "Oh no," she whispered, her face paling. "Not again." I felt anger boiling within me. This is so unfair. Why can't people just let us heal? Allie's eyes filled with tears. "I can't believe this is happening again. I thought we were starting to move forward." "We were, but this is like pouring salt in the wound," I snapped, the frustration spilling over. As the reality of the situation set in, I could see the shame creeping back into her expression. I didn't want that for her, especially after all the progress we had made. Let's respond, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We can't let this stand without saying something. Allie shook her head. No, I don't want to draw more attention to it. It'll just make things worse. But if we stay silent, it feels like we're letting them win, I argued. We have to stand up for ourselves. She looked torn, and I could sense the internal struggle. What would we even say? I don't want to keep reliving this. We could focus on how far we've come and emphasize the importance of healing, I suggested, my heart racing. We can't let this define us. After a long pause, she finally nodded. Okay, let's draft a response. But we need to be careful about how we approach it. We sat down together, typing out a message that acknowledged the pain but also highlighted our commitment to moving forward. It was a balancing act, honest but not defensive. Once we finished, Allie hit send, and we both sat back, a mix of anxiety and relief washing over us. I hope this helps, she said quietly. Me too, I replied, but deep down, I knew the fight wasn't over. The next few days were a whirlwind. The blog post sparked renewed interest and conversation within our community. Some praised our response, while others continued to criticize and dissect our relationship as if it were a public spectacle. It was exhausting, and I could see the toll it was taking on Allie. One night, after a particularly rough day, I found her sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. I could sense her frustration bubbling just below the surface. Allie, talk to me. What's going on? I asked, gently nudging her shoulder. I feel like I'm drowning in all this, she said, her voice breaking. Every time I think we're moving forward, something pulls us back. It's like we can't escape it. I pulled her close, wrapping my arms around her. We will get through this. We're doing the work. Just remember, this doesn't define you. It's one part of your story, not the whole. I know, but it's so hard to shake the shame, she replied, her voice muffled against my shoulder. I just want to be free of it. Then let's focus on what we can control, I said firmly. We can keep working on ourselves and our relationship. We can continue to share our story, but only on our terms. As we talked, I realized how crucial it was for both of us to find a way to reclaim our narrative. It wasn't just about responding to the negativity, it was about creating a new path forward that wasn't overshadowed by the past. The following week, during one of our therapy sessions, we discussed the fallout from the blog post. Dr. Harris encouraged us to think of ways to reclaim our narrative and build resilience against the external pressures. Consider this a chance to redefine your story, she said, her tone encouraging. You have the power to shape how you want to be seen. Allie looked thoughtful. What if we shared more about our journey, not just the betrayal but the healing process, the work we're doing to rebuild trust? That's a great idea, I chimed in, feeling a surge of excitement. We can create content that emphasizes growth, vulnerability, and hope. It might help others who are facing similar challenges. Dr. Harris smiled. That's exactly the mindset you need. It's about taking control and using your experience to foster connection and understanding. Inspired by the session, we began brainstorming new ideas for our courses and social media content. We decided to create a series focused on rebuilding after betrayal, using our story as a foundation while incorporating insights from our therapy journey. As we worked on our project, I could see Allie's confidence returning. She was passionate about sharing our experience, turning our pain into something constructive. It felt empowering, like we were finally taking back control. As the weeks went by, we released the new content, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. People resonated with our honesty and vulnerability. It felt like we were slowly transforming the narrative from one of shame to one of resilience. Yet, even amidst the positive feedback, I could still sense the occasional judgmental glance or comment lurking in the background. It was a reminder that while we were making progress, we still had to navigate the complexities of our community and the world outside our bubble. One evening, after a particularly successful live Q, I turned to Allie, who was still buzzing with energy. I'm proud of us. We're making a real difference. Me too, she said, her eyes shining. I feel like we're finally turning the corner. But there's still so much to unpack. I know, I replied, taking her hand. But we'll face it together, one step at a time. As we embraced, I felt a renewed sense of hope. While the past still had its grip on us, we were finding ways to reclaim our narrative and create a future built on trust, understanding, and love. Together, we were ready to face whatever came next. The momentum from our recent projects fueled our spirits, but the underlying tension still lurked in the background. Despite our strides forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that there were unresolved issues simmering just below the surface. I knew that for us to truly move on, we needed to confront everything, especially the feelings we had around Paul. One evening, as we were winding down from a long day, I turned to Allie. "I think we need to talk about Paul again." She sighed, her expression turning serious. "I've been thinking the same thing. I just don't want to keep revisiting the past if it's going to hurt us more." "I get that," I said, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "But we can't let his presence hang over us like a dark cloud. We need to address how his actions have affected us, and how we can move forward without his shadow looming." Allie nodded slowly, her brow furrowing. "Okay, let's talk. But I don't want to get lost in blame. I want this to be about us." We settled onto the couch, the familiar space now charged with a mix of anxiety and determination. "What are you feeling about Paul now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I feel anger, mostly," she admitted, her voice low. "Anger that he took advantage of my vulnerability. Anger that I let him in. But more than that, I feel sadness. Sadness for what I've lost and for how easily I let my guard down." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "I think I've been angry too, but more about how it affected you and us. I wanted to protect you, and I felt powerless to stop what happened." Allie looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "Do you think we can ever truly put this behind us?" "I believe we can," I said firmly. "But we need to untangle the emotions tied to this. We have to own our feelings, not just about the affair but about the entire situation." We began to explore the nuances of our emotions, slowly peeling back layers of hurt and resentment. As we spoke, I realized how important it was for both of us to be honest, not just with each other but with ourselves. "Do you ever wonder why I was drawn to Paul?" Allie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, my heart racing. "I think part of it was feeling overwhelmed. You were under so much pressure, and he became an escape. But I also wonder if it was about more than that." "What do you mean?" she asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice. "Maybe it was a way of testing boundaries. You were unhappy, and instead of coming to me, you sought comfort elsewhere. It's like you were searching for something you thought was missing in our relationship," I suggested carefully. Her eyes widened. "That makes sense. I didn't realize I was doing that until it was too late. I didn't know how to ask for help or to communicate my feelings." We sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on the enormity of what we had uncovered. "It's a cycle," I continued. "We were both stuck in our own patterns of communication. You felt isolated, and I was so focused on maintaining our image that I didn't notice your struggles." Allie nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I wish I had been brave enough to speak up sooner. Maybe then we wouldn't have ended up here. But we can't dwell on that," I reminded her gently. "We have to learn from it and commit to being open with each other moving forward. No more hiding." "Agreed," she said, her voice steadier now. "It's time to break that cycle." As the conversation continued, we began to identify specific actions we could take to improve our communication. We agreed to set aside time each week for check-ins, where we would openly discuss our feelings and any issues that might arise. It was a way to ensure we didn't let unresolved emotions fester. After our talk, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The weight of unspoken truths had lifted, and I could see a path forward, one where we could both heal and grow. The next day, during our therapy session, we shared our insights with Dr. Harris. She smiled, clearly pleased with our progress. "It sounds like you both have made significant strides in understanding the roots of your issues," she said. "Recognizing the patterns is a crucial step." We continued to explore our feelings and how to navigate our relationship with Paul, particularly concerning our community. "Do you think we need to address Paul publicly again?" I asked. "I don't want to give him any more power over our narrative," Allie said. "But I also don't want to ignore the elephant in the room." Dr. Harris suggested a balanced approach. "You might consider discussing the impact of external influences on relationships in a broader sense. It doesn't have to be just about Paul, but about the importance of boundaries and self-awareness." That resonated with both of us. We could use our experience to help others without giving Paul undue attention. It felt like a way to reclaim our narrative while focusing on the lessons learned. As the session wrapped up, I felt a renewed sense of determination. We had taken significant steps toward healing, and while the journey was far from over, I believed we were on the right path. That evening, as we sat down to work on our next content piece, Ali turned to me with a thoughtful expression. What if we shared our strategies for dealing with external pressures and maintaining healthy boundaries in relationships? I love that idea, I replied, feeling a surge of excitement. We could share how to navigate difficult situations without losing sight of what matters most. As we brainstormed, the creativity flowed. We envisioned a series of videos and articles that would empower others to take control of their narratives and foster healthy communication. And in that moment, as we laughed and created together, I felt a deep sense of connection to Ali, a connection that had been tested but ultimately strengthened by our willingness to confront the past. Together, we were not just surviving, we were learning to thrive, reclaiming our story one step at a time. After weeks of intense reflection and hard work, we finally launched our new content series. The videos and articles focused on reclaiming personal narratives, establishing boundaries, and fostering open communication in relationships. I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension as we shared our experiences with the world, but I was hopeful it would resonate with others facing similar challenges. The initial response was overwhelmingly positive. Comments flooded in from viewers expressing gratitude for our honesty and vulnerability. "Thank you for sharing your story," one message read. "It's comforting to know I'm not alone in this." As we engaged with our community, I noticed an outpouring of support. People were sharing their own struggles and triumphs, creating an atmosphere of empathy and understanding. It felt like we were part of something bigger, a movement toward healing and connection. But amidst the positive feedback, there were also a few critical voices. Some commenters took issue with our decision to bring our personal lives into our professional space. "Why should we care about your problems?" one comment read. "Stick to the advice and stop airing your dirty laundry." Reading those words stung. "It's disheartening to see this," I said to Ali as we reviewed the comments together. "We're trying to help, but some people just don't understand." Ali sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I knew there would be critics. But it still hurts to see it in writing. We've put ourselves out there to foster understanding, not judgment. We can't let a few negative comments overshadow the good we're doing," I reminded her. "We have to focus on the people who are finding value in our story." She nodded, but I could see the doubt lingering in her eyes. "I just worry about how this will affect us long term. Will we always be defined by this?" "It's a part of our journey, yes," I said, "but it doesn't have to be the whole story. We can continue to grow and evolve. This is just one chapter." As the days passed, the conversation around our content continued to evolve. Supportive messages flooded in, while some critics became more vocal. One particularly scathing blog post emerged, titled, "The Flawed Advice of John and Alice, a Cautionary Tale." I felt a surge of anger as I read it. The author accused us of capitalizing on our mistakes for views and monetary gain, painting our work as disingenuous. "How can people be so cruel?" I muttered, my hands trembling with frustration. Ali looked over my shoulder at the screen. "I know it's hard to read, but we have to remember why we started this. It's not about the haters, it's about the people we can help." "Right," I said, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "But it feels like a personal attack. They don't see the effort we've put in or the growth we've experienced." "Maybe we should address it directly," Ali suggested. "Not in a defensive way, but just to clarify our intentions." I considered her idea. We could create a video addressing some of the criticisms while also reaffirming our mission. It could show that we're not afraid to engage with differing opinions. "Exactly," she said, her eyes brightening. "Let's be transparent about our journey and remind everyone that we're still learning." We set to work on the video, crafting a script that acknowledged the critics while also emphasizing our commitment to helping others. We wanted to convey that growth is not linear and that everyone has struggles, even those who provide advice. When we released the video, I felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. As the comments began to roll in, I braced myself for backlash. But to my surprise, the response was overwhelmingly supportive. Many viewers expressed gratitude for our willingness to engage with criticism and share our authentic selves. "Thank you for being real," one comment read. "It's refreshing to see someone own their mistakes and continue to strive for better." As the positive responses poured in, I felt the weight of doubt lift from my shoulders. "Maybe we're on the right track after all," I said to Ali, smiling. She beamed back at me. I knew we could do it. We just had to be true to ourselves and our journey. Quote. Encouraged by the reception, we decided to host a live Q. Quote. As the session progressed, the questions poured in. Some focused on our strategies for rebuilding trust, while others asked about how to navigate external pressures in relationships. Each question felt like an opportunity to share, connect, and provide insight. Towards the end of the session, one viewer asked, "How do you handle the negativity that comes with sharing your story?" Ali took a breath, glancing at me before responding. "It's not always easy. We've had our fair share of criticism. But we've learned to focus on the positive impact we can make. Ultimately, our journey is about helping others, and that's what keeps us motivated." I added, "We realize that not everyone will agree with our approach, but we're committed to being authentic and transparent. That's what matters most to us." As we wrapped up the session, I felt a surge of gratitude for the supportive community we were building. In that moment, I realized that while the journey had its challenges, we were learning to navigate them together, stronger and more united than ever. That night, as we reflected on the day, I turned to Ali. "I think we're really finding our voice in all of this." "I believe so too," she said, her eyes shining with determination. "And as long as we stay true to ourselves, we'll continue to grow together." In that moment, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would undoubtedly have its ups and downs, but I knew we were ready to face whatever came our way, hand in hand. As the weeks passed, our community continued to grow. And our content began to resonate with even more people. We received messages from viewers who had faced similar struggles, sharing their stories of healing and resilience. It was incredibly fulfilling to know that our journey was inspiring others to confront their own challenges. But amid the positivity, I couldn't shake the lingering discomfort surrounding Paul. He had become a ghost in our story, haunting us from the sidelines, and I felt the need to address that unease. One evening, after a long day of work, I found Ali in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked preoccupied, and I could sense something was on her mind. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, settling beside her. She sighed, putting her phone down. "I just saw a post about Paul. It's been making the rounds again." I felt my stomach twist. "What did it say?" "Just the usual gossip. Some people are speculating about what he's been up to since the affair came to light," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "It's like he's become this figure for everyone to scrutinize, and I hate that we're still tied to him." I took a moment to process her words. "I get that, but we can't let his actions dictate our narrative. We're writing our own story now." "I know, but it's hard not to look back," she admitted, her eyes distant. "It feels like every time we take a step forward, something pulls us back." "Maybe we should talk about it," I suggested. "Not just between us, but with our community. It might help to clear the air once and for all." Quote. Ali hesitated, contemplating my suggestion. "You think so? I'm not sure I want to revisit all of that publicly. I understand your hesitance, but we need to reclaim our power. We can't let the past control us," I insisted. "And if we share how we're dealing with it, maybe it'll help others who are going through something similar." After a moment of silence, she nodded. "Okay, let's do it. But we need to approach it carefully. I don't want to give Paul any more attention than he deserves." Quote. We began drafting a post, outlining our feelings and experiences regarding Paul while emphasizing our commitment to healing. We wanted to share how we had been working through the aftermath of the affair and how we were committed to moving forward. Once we finished, Ali looked at me, her eyes filled with resolve. "This feels right. We're taking control of the narrative." "Exactly," I replied, feeling a surge of excitement. "Let's share this with our community and encourage them to confront their own pasts without fear." Quote. When we released the post, I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. Would people understand our intentions? Would we face backlash for even mentioning Paul again? The response came in quickly. Many commenters expressed gratitude for our honesty, sharing their own experiences with infidelity and the importance of confronting painful truths. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak about this," one person wrote. "It's inspiring to see how you're turning a painful experience into something positive." Quote. However, a few voices rose in criticism, suggesting we were trying to vilify Paul again. I took a deep breath, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "We can't let the negativity overshadow the positive feedback," I reminded Ali. She nodded, though I could see the tension in her expression. "It's just hard. I don't want this to turn into another spectacle." Over the next few days, as the post continued to circulate, I noticed Allie growing more withdrawn. "Are you okay?" I asked one evening as we sat down for dinner. "I'm just feeling overwhelmed," she admitted, pushing her food around on her plate. I thought addressing Paul would help, but it feels like we've opened a floodgate of emotions again. I reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "It's okay to feel that way. We're dealing with a lot of complicated feelings. But remember, we're in this together. We can talk through it." That night, we had a long conversation about our emotions and how the past continued to shape our present. I reminded her of the progress we had made, emphasizing that while Paul was part of our story, he didn't have to be the focal point. "We're building a new life, one step at a time," I said. "Let's keep focusing on that." Slowly, I could see the tension ease from her shoulders. "You're right. I don't want to let him take up any more space in our lives. I want to keep moving forward." The next few days were filled with ups and downs. The community continued to engage with our post, and the dialogue around confronting past mistakes became increasingly rich. We received messages from people who were inspired by our willingness to address difficult subjects openly. One afternoon, we received an email from a viewer named Jessica, who shared her own story of infidelity and the pain it had caused her marriage. "Reading your posts helped me find the courage to talk to my husband about my past," she wrote. "Thank you for showing me that it's possible to rebuild and heal." Allie's eyes sparkled with hope as she read the message. "This is exactly why we're doing this," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "If we can help even one person, it's worth it." As we continued to connect with our community, I felt the weight of the past slowly lifting. Yes, the specter of Paul still lingered, but we were learning to navigate it with resilience. We were becoming more adept at turning pain into strength, and it felt liberating. That evening, as we reflected on our progress, I took Allie's hand and looked her in the eye. "No matter what happens, we've built something beautiful together. Let's keep focusing on that." "Agreed," she replied, her smile radiant. "We're creating our own future, one filled with hope and growth. I'm ready to keep moving forward." With renewed determination, we committed to continuing our journey, together, side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. We were writing our own narrative, one that celebrated resilience, love, and the strength to overcome even the darkest moments. As our community continued to flourish, Allie and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We had turned a corner, and each day brought new opportunities to connect with others and share our story. But just as we were settling into this new rhythm, an unexpected event turned our world upside down. Paul reached out. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon when I saw a message pop up on my phone. The name was unmistakable. My heart raced as I opened the text. "Hey John, can we talk? I'd like to clear the air." "What the hell?" I muttered, showing the screen to Allie, who was sitting across the room. Her expression shifted from relaxed to tense in an instant. "What does he want?" she asked, her voice tight with unease. "I have no idea," I replied, my mind racing. "Should I respond?" "I don't know," she said, clearly conflicted. "Part of me wants to tell him to go away, but I also think it might be worth hearing him out. We've been trying to move on, but maybe this could help us finally close that chapter." Taking a deep breath, I decided to reply. "Sure, let's talk. When and where?" A few moments later, Paul responded, "How about Thursday at the coffee shop on Main Street? 3 p.m.? Sounds good," I typed back, trying to mask my anxiety. As the week dragged on, I found myself oscillating between anger and curiosity. What could Paul possibly have to say that would change anything? Allie and I had worked hard to build our lives back up. I wasn't sure I was ready to revisit that painful chapter. Thursday arrived, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. Allie and I drove to the coffee shop in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked as we parked. "I don't know, but I think it's better to face this head-on," I replied, trying to project confidence. "We can't let him linger in the background forever." As we entered the shop, I spotted Paul sitting at a table in the corner, nervously tapping his fingers against the wood. He looked older, more worn than I remembered. As we approached, he glanced up, his expression a mix of apprehension and resignation. "Hey, thanks for meeting me," he said, standing up and offering a weak smile. "Let's just get this over with," I replied, my tone sharper than I intended. Paul nodded, the tension palpable as we all settled into our seats. "I know this is probably the last thing you want to do, but I felt it was important to reach out." "Why now?" Allie asked, her voice steady but laced with emotion. Why after all this time? I've been doing a lot of reflecting, he admitted, his gaze dropping to the table. I've realized how much I messed up, not just with you guys, but in my own life. I wanted to apologize for everything. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to contain the whirlwind of emotions surging within me. You think an apology is going to fix anything? I shot back, unable to hide my frustration. You shattered our lives, Paul. I know, he replied, looking genuinely remorseful. And I'm not expecting you to forgive me right away. I just wanted you to know that I regret my actions. They've haunted me every day since. Allie exchanged a glance with me, her eyes searching for answers. What do you expect to gain from this conversation? We've moved on. We're trying to rebuild our lives. Paul sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't want to disrupt that. I just felt like I owed you both some honesty. I want to take responsibility for my actions and acknowledge how they hurt you. Why should we care about your feelings now? I snapped, feeling the anger boil over. You had your chance to be honest, and you blew it. I get that, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I needed to say it. I'm not asking for forgiveness or even friendship. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. The silence that followed felt heavy, as if the weight of the world rested on our shoulders. I could feel Allie's gaze on me, urging me to process my feelings. Look, Paul, I said finally, my voice steadier. We've spent a long time healing from what you did. Your apology doesn't erase the damage. I understand, he replied, his tone earnest. But I hope it can at least help you both move forward, knowing I recognize the pain I caused. Allie took a deep breath. I appreciate your honesty, Paul. But this is a complicated situation. We've worked hard to rebuild trust and communicate openly, and we can't let your past actions define us. Absolutely, he agreed, looking relieved that we were at least willing to engage. I don't want to be part of your lives anymore, but I hope you can find closure. After a few more minutes of awkward conversation, we finally stood to leave. Take care of yourselves, Paul said quietly, his eyes filled with regret. As we walked out of the coffee shop, I turned to Allie. How do you feel about that? I don't know, she admitted, shaking her head. Part of me wants to just forget he exists, but another part feels lighter knowing he's acknowledged the pain he caused. I get that, I said, feeling a weight lift off my chest. It's a step, even if it's a small one. The drive home was quieter than usual, both of us lost in thought. It was a strange mixture of relief and residual anger. But as we pulled into the driveway, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity. We've faced him, and we've faced our past, I said, looking at Allie. Now it's time to focus on our future. Agreed, she replied, her eyes sparkling with determination. We've come so far, and I don't want to let anything, including Paul, hold us back any longer. That night, as we sat together on the couch, I felt a sense of unity in our journey. We were stronger together, and no matter what had happened in the past, we were committed to building a future filled with love, trust, and open communication. Paul was just a chapter in our story, one we had finally begun to close. Together, we would write the rest, hand in hand, ready to embrace whatever came next. The days following my meeting with Paul were filled with a mix of emotions. The relief of confronting him lingered, but there was also a sense of vulnerability that came from revisiting old wounds. However, Allie and I were resolute in our commitment to focus on our healing and growth. As we continued to engage with our community, I noticed a shift in the conversations. Our discussions around confronting infidelity and the importance of open communication began to spark deeper dialogue. People were sharing not only their struggles but also their triumphs in navigating complex relationships. One evening, as we were reviewing comments on our latest video, Allie turned to me, her face glowing with excitement. Look at this message from Sarah, she said, pointing to the screen. She wrote about how she had a difficult conversation with her partner after watching our content. They were able to clear up misunderstandings that had been festering for months. That's amazing, I replied, feeling a swell of pride. It's incredible to see the positive impact we're having on others. We're not just sharing our story, we're helping people find their voice. Allie nodded, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. It's so rewarding to know that our experiences can empower others to take action in their own lives. It makes everything we've gone through worth it. Encouraged by this momentum, we decided to host a live discussion event, inviting our community to share their experiences and insights. We titled it, Navigating the Waters of Relationships, Confronting Challenges Together. The goal was to create a safe space where people could express their feelings and learn from one another. As the day of the event approached, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would people show up? Would we be able to facilitate a meaningful conversation? The evening arrived, and we logged into the virtual meeting, my heart racing. To my surprise, the attendance exceeded our expectations. Faces filled the screen, each representing a unique story, a different journey. "Welcome, everyone," Ali said, her voice warm and inviting. "We're so grateful to have you all here tonight. Our aim is to create an open dialogue where we can learn from each other." Quote. As the discussion unfolded, it became clear that many participants were eager to share their stories. One woman named Rebecca opened up about her experience with infidelity and the long road to rebuilding trust with her partner. "It felt like the ground was pulled out from under me," she said, her voice trembling. "But we decided to confront the pain head-on, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done." The room was filled with empathy as others chimed in, sharing their own experiences. "You're so brave for talking about this," one participant said. "It's inspiring to see how you've turned your pain into something positive." As the evening progressed, I felt a sense of connection that transcended our individual experiences. We were all navigating similar waters, and there was power in the shared vulnerability. People laughed, cried, and offered words of encouragement, creating a sense of community that felt electric. Midway through the discussion, I noticed a participant named David raising his hand. "I've been listening, and I just wanted to say how important this conversation is," he said. "I've been on the receiving end of infidelity, and it shattered my trust. But hearing you all speak about communication and healing gives me hope." Ali and I exchanged glances, feeling the weight of his words. "Thank you for sharing that, David," I said, my voice steady. "It's vital for both sides to recognize the pain and work toward healing." The dialogue continued, with participants offering strategies for rebuilding trust and fostering open communication. We discussed the importance of vulnerability, setting boundaries, and the courage it takes to face difficult conversations. As the event began to wind down, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. This wasn't just a platform for sharing our story, it had transformed into a space for healing and growth. Before we wrapped up, Ali took a moment to reflect. "We started this journey thinking we were alone, but tonight has shown us that we're part of a larger community. We're all navigating these challenges together. And that connection is incredibly powerful." As the final comments poured in, a feeling of hope filled the virtual room. People expressed their appreciation for the safe space we had created, and many promised to take the lessons learned back into their own relationships. When the meeting finally ended, I leaned back in my chair, feeling exhilarated. "That was incredible," I said, looking at Ali. "I can't believe how open and honest everyone was. We've created something special." She smiled, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I knew we could do it. It's amazing to see how our story has resonated with so many people. We're really making a difference." That night, as we reflected on the event, I felt a sense of fulfillment wash over me. We had taken our pain and transformed it into something beautiful, something that was helping others heal. Over the next few weeks, we continued to engage with our community, sharing more stories and fostering open dialogue. The connections we built were profound, and I could feel the energy of our shared experiences propelling us forward. But as we basked in the positivity, I was reminded of how delicate the balance of trust and communication could be. Just as we were moving forward, I knew there would be challenges ahead, challenges that could threaten the progress we had made. One evening, as we prepared for another live session, Ali turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "What if we address the concept of forgiveness next? It's such a crucial part of healing." Quote. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "That's a powerful topic. It's not just about forgiving others, it's about forgiving ourselves too." As we dove into preparations, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Our story was far from over, and while we had made great strides, I knew we needed to continue nurturing our relationship and our community. Together, we would face whatever challenges lay ahead, embracing growth, healing, and the transformative power of our shared experiences. As Ali and I prepared for our next live session, the topic of forgiveness loomed large in my mind. It was a concept that carried immense weight, one that could either heal wounds or deepen them. While we had made significant progress in our journey, I knew that addressing forgiveness would require us to confront some uncomfortable truths. The day of the session arrived, and as I set up the equipment, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Would people be willing to share their experiences with forgiveness? Would we be able to guide the conversation in a meaningful way? As we logged into the meeting, I noticed a familiar wave of attendees. Each face represented a unique journey, and I could sense the collective energy in the virtual space. Welcome, everyone, Ali began, her voice warm and inviting. Tonight, we're diving into a topic that many of us struggle with: forgiveness. Whether it's forgiving someone else or ourselves, it's a crucial part of healing. I watched as the comments began to pour in. Many participants expressed excitement about the topic, sharing their own struggles with forgiveness. One attendee, a woman named Maria, was the first to raise her hand. I've been trying to forgive my partner for a betrayal, but I feel stuck. It's like I want to forgive, but I can't let go of the pain. That's a common struggle, I replied, empathizing with her feelings. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing the behavior, it's about finding a way to release the hold that pain has on us. Ali added, it's also important to recognize that forgiveness is a process, not a destination. It takes time, and it's okay to feel conflicted along the way. As the discussion continued, participants began to share their own stories. One man named Tom spoke candidly about his journey with self-forgiveness after losing his temper during an argument. I hurt someone I love, and it haunts me, he admitted. How do I forgive myself when I keep replaying that moment in my head? That's a powerful question, Tom, I said, feeling the weight of his vulnerability. Self-forgiveness often starts with acknowledging our mistakes and understanding that we're all human. It's about learning from those moments and committing to do better moving forward. Throughout the evening, the conversation flowed seamlessly, with participants sharing their experiences of both forgiving others and struggling with self-acceptance. Each story felt like a thread weaving a larger tapestry of shared humanity, and I was struck by the resilience on display. As we approached the end of the session, I noticed a participant named Sarah hesitating to speak up. Can I share something? She finally asked, her voice trembling. Absolutely, Ali encouraged her. We're here to listen. I've been dealing with a lot of anger toward my father for years, Sarah began. He was never there for me, and I thought I could never forgive him. But after listening to you both, I realized I've been holding onto that anger to protect myself. Maybe it's time to let it go. Tears filled her eyes as she spoke, and the room fell silent, each person holding space for her pain. That's a huge realization, Sarah, I said gently. Letting go doesn't mean you condone his actions, it means you're choosing to free yourself from the burden of that anger. Ali added, it's an act of self-love. You deserve to heal, and that starts with acknowledging your feelings. As Sarah wiped away her tears, I could see the weight beginning to lift from her shoulders. Thank you. I've been so afraid to confront this, but I think I'm ready to try. The session ended with a sense of catharsis. Participants expressed gratitude for the space we had created, where they could share their struggles and support one another in their journeys toward forgiveness. After the meeting, Ali and I sat together, reflecting on the powerful stories we had heard. I feel like we created something really special tonight, she said, her eyes shining. So many people opened up in a way that felt transformative. It was incredible, I agreed, feeling a swell of pride. And it reminded me of how important it is to keep addressing these difficult topics. There's so much healing that can happen when we share our stories. Quote. As the days passed, the impact of our forgiveness session continued to resonate within our community. Comments and messages poured in, with many people expressing their gratitude for the discussion and the insights they had gained. But amidst the positivity, I found myself wrestling with my own feelings of forgiveness. While I had made great strides in moving forward, there were still moments when the pain of the past resurfaced, particularly in regard to Paul. I realized I hadn't fully confronted the complexity of forgiving him for the hurt he caused. One evening, as we prepared for bed, I turned to Ali. I think I need to address my feelings about Paul again. I've been avoiding it, but it keeps coming up. Do you want to talk about it now? She asked, concern etched on her face. Yeah, I think I do, I replied, feeling a sense of urgency. I've been reflecting on the forgiveness topic, and I realized I need to come to terms with my feelings toward him. Ali nodded, her support palpable. I'm here for you. What's on your mind? I want to forgive him. Not for his sake, but for mine. Holding on to this anger is exhausting, I admitted. But every time I think about it, I feel the rage rising again. It's okay to feel angry, she reassured me. But it's also okay to let that anger go. Forgiveness doesn't mean you're excusing his actions, it's about freeing yourself from the pain. I took a deep breath, allowing her words to sink in. I want to move on. I want to be able to look back without feeling that weight. I just don't know how. Quote. Maybe it's about finding closure in your own way, Ali suggested. It could be writing a letter to him, expressing everything you feel, and then choosing to release it. The idea resonated with me. That could work. It would allow me to articulate my feelings without needing a direct response from him. That night, as I sat at my desk, I poured my heart into the letter. I wrote about the pain his actions had caused, the trust that had been shattered, and the journey I had taken to reclaim my life. I expressed my anger and disappointment, but I also acknowledged the growth that had come from that experience. As I signed my name, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted. I didn't need to send the letter. The act of writing it had already brought me a step closer to forgiveness. The next morning, I shared my experience with Ali, who smiled proudly. That's a huge step forward. You're actively choosing to release that weight. I feel lighter already, I said, a sense of peace settling within me. I'm ready to keep moving forward. Together, we reflected on the importance of forgiveness, not just in our relationship with others, but also with ourselves. It was a journey that required patience and compassion, but it was also essential for healing. As we continued to engage with our community and facilitate discussions around forgiveness, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each conversation reinforced the idea that healing is a continuous process, and it's okay to take one step at a time. In the weeks that followed, I embraced the idea of forgiveness as an ongoing journey, not a final destination. With Ali by my side, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together, we would continue to grow and thrive. With the concept of forgiveness fresh in our minds, Ali and I realized that while we had made great strides in our relationship, there was still work to be done in strengthening our foundation. We had come so far, but we needed to ensure that we were both committed to fostering a relationship built on trust, communication, and resilience. One Saturday morning, I suggested we dedicate some time to reevaluate our relationship. What if we make a list of things we want to focus on moving forward? I proposed over breakfast. We've tackled some heavy topics, but I think it's important to identify our goals together. Ali's eyes lit up. I love that idea. It's essential to keep our communication open and make sure we're on the same page. Let's set aside some time today to really dive into this. After breakfast, we settled on the couch with our notebooks, ready to brainstorm. I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. I knew this would require us to be honest about our needs and aspirations. Okay, let's start with what we value most in our relationship, I suggested. What are the core principles that guide us? Ali thought for a moment before writing down, trust. It's the foundation of everything, she said. Without trust, we can't build anything meaningful. I nodded in agreement. Communication is another key principle. We need to be able to express our feelings openly, no matter how difficult the conversation might be. As we continued to jot down our thoughts, we identified several other core values: respect, empathy, shared goals, and emotional support. Each value felt like a building block, reinforcing the structure of our relationship. Once we had our list, I proposed we set specific intentions related to each value. How can we actively embody these principles in our daily lives? I asked. Ali looked thoughtful. For trust, we could commit to being transparent about our feelings and any concerns that arise. If something's bothering us, we need to address it right away. For communication, we could set aside regular check-in times, I suggested. Maybe once a week, we sit down and discuss how we're feeling about our relationship, our individual goals, and any challenges we're facing. I love that, Ali said, her enthusiasm infectious. It'll create a space where we can both be heard and understood. As we fleshed out our intentions, I began to feel a sense of excitement about our future. We were actively taking steps to build a stronger foundation, and it felt empowering. After several hours of brainstorming, we had crafted a comprehensive plan. We both felt a renewed sense of commitment to each other, and our shared vision for the future gave me hope. That evening, we decided to celebrate our progress with a special dinner. Ali whipped up our favorite dish, and we set the table with candles and soft music. As we sat down to eat, I raised my glass for a toast. To us, I said, looking into her eyes. To our journey, our growth, and the love that continues to strengthen us. Allie smiled, her gaze warm and full of affection. And to the future we're building together. I can't wait to see where this path takes us. As we enjoyed our meal, I felt a profound sense of connection between us. The act of intentionally discussing our values and aspirations had not only brought us closer but also reminded us of the importance of prioritizing our relationship. Over the next few weeks, we implemented our plan, dedicating time to check in with each other and actively embodying our core values. We found ourselves communicating more openly and addressing any concerns before they had the chance to fester. However, amidst the positivity, I felt a lingering apprehension regarding Paul. While I had taken steps toward forgiveness, the unresolved emotions still hovered in the background. I realized that my journey toward complete healing required me to confront these feelings head-on. One afternoon, as Allie and I sat on the porch enjoying the sunshine, I decided to share my thoughts. I think I need to talk about Paul again. I know we've been focusing on our relationship, but I still feel some unresolved anger. Allie turned to me, her expression encouraging. I'm here for you. What's on your mind? I thought I had moved past it, but the more I think about it, the more I realize I need to process those feelings fully, I admitted. I don't want to carry that weight with me as we move forward. That makes total sense, she replied, her support unwavering. Have you thought about how you want to approach it? I think I need to write another letter, I said, my heart racing at the thought. This one would focus on the anger and hurt I still feel. I want to get it all out. Allie nodded. That sounds like a healthy way to express your feelings. You don't have to send it, just writing it could be cathartic. That evening, I sat down at my desk, determined to confront my emotions. With each word, I poured my heart onto the page, detailing the hurt and anger that had been simmering beneath the surface. I wrote about the betrayal, the trust that had been shattered, and the impact it had on my life. As I finished the letter, I felt a release. I wasn't just addressing Paul, I was also acknowledging my own pain. I sealed the letter in an envelope, not with the intention of sending it, but as a symbolic gesture of letting go. The next day, I shared my experience with Allie, who praised me for taking that step. I'm so proud of you for confronting those feelings. It's a crucial part of your healing process. Thanks, I said, feeling lighter. I think it was necessary to fully acknowledge the hurt before I can truly forgive. As the weeks rolled on, our relationship flourished. Our commitment to open communication and mutual support deepened our bond, allowing us to navigate challenges more effectively. One evening, while we were snuggled on the couch watching a movie, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I can't believe how far we've come, I said, wrapping my arms around Allie. We've created a safe space for each other. And it feels incredible. I feel the same way, she replied, her eyes sparkling. I love how we're prioritizing our relationship and building a stronger foundation together. With each passing day, I felt more confident in our ability to navigate whatever challenges life might throw our way. We had faced the storm and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the future together. But even as I reveled in our progress, I knew that healing was not a linear path. There would be ups and downs, and I was committed to facing them alongside Allie. One step at a time. Together, we were building a love that was resilient, compassionate, and full of hope for the future. Just when I felt we were finally in a good place, life threw us an unexpected curveball. It was a typical Tuesday morning when I received a text from one of our course participants, Lisa, asking if I had seen the latest social media posts from Paul. My stomach dropped as I opened the link she sent. There it was, a series of photos featuring Paul, smiling and carefree, alongside a group of friends. But what struck me most was the caption, feeling grateful for new beginnings. It felt like a punch to the gut. How could he be moving on so easily? My emotions spiraled into a mix of anger and resentment. I tried to shake it off, but the feelings festered throughout the day. I shared my frustration with Allie that evening. I can't believe he's acting like nothing happened, I vented, pacing around the living room. It just feels so unfair. Allie listened intently, her expression empathetic. It's understandable to feel that way. You've been through so much, and seeing him move on can stir up unresolved feelings. I thought I was over it, I said, running a hand through my hair. But now it feels like I'm back to square one. How can he just pretend like everything is fine? Sometimes people deal with their pain differently, she suggested gently. But it doesn't mean you have to compare your journey to his. You're working through your feelings. And that's what matters. I appreciated her perspective, but it didn't ease the storm brewing inside me. I want to confront him, I said, feeling a surge of determination. I need to express how I feel about everything. Allie's eyes widened. Are you sure that's the best course of action? Confronting him might only lead to more hurt. Maybe it's better to focus on your healing instead. I get that, but I can't let this go without saying something, I replied, frustration bubbling to the surface. It feels like I'm letting him win by keeping quiet. Allie sighed, clearly torn. I understand. Just be careful. Think about what you want to achieve from this confrontation. Are you looking for closure or just to vent your anger? Closure, I admitted, but I also want him to understand the impact of his actions. I want him to know how his betrayal affected my life. That night, I couldn't shake the thoughts swirling in my mind. I decided to draft an email to Paul, carefully articulating my feelings. I wrote about the hurt and betrayal, detailing how his actions had shaken my world. I expressed my desire for him to take responsibility for the pain he had caused, not just to me but also to Allie. After hours of contemplation, I hit send. A sense of relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The next morning, as I sat at my desk, I couldn't shake the anxiety about his potential response. Would he apologize? Would he lash out? My mind raced with possibilities. When I received a reply later that day, my heart raced. I opened the email and read his message, but the disappointment settled in like a heavy fog. He acknowledged my feelings but brushed off the impact of his actions, claiming he was moving forward, and that I should too. It felt dismissive, as if my pain didn't matter to him. Can you believe this? I exclaimed, showing the email to Allie. He thinks it's that easy. Just move on, right? Allie looked pained, her brow furrowed. I'm sorry, love. It's frustrating to see him dismiss your feelings like that. But remember, this is about your healing, not his response. You're right, but it still stings, I admitted, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. I thought confronting him would bring me some closure, but instead, it feels like I'm just more angry. Maybe that's okay, Allie said softly. Emotions are complex. It's normal to feel angry when you're processing betrayal. The important thing is to channel that energy into something constructive. Over the next few days, I felt a mix of anger and disappointment as I reflected on the email exchange. The unexpected setback had reignited feelings I thought I had begun to resolve. I found myself wrestling with questions: would I ever fully move on? Would Paul ever take responsibility for the hurt he caused? In the midst of this turmoil, I realized I needed to refocus on what truly mattered: my relationship with Allie. We had worked hard to build a strong foundation, and I didn't want my unresolved feelings about Paul to overshadow our progress. One evening, I suggested a spontaneous weekend getaway. Let's take a break from everything and reconnect, I said. We can explore a new place, just the two of us. Allie's face brightened. That sounds amazing. A change of scenery might be exactly what we need. We packed our bags and headed to a cozy cabin in the mountains, surrounded by nature's beauty. As we settled in, I felt a sense of peace washing over me. The fresh air and serene surroundings provided a welcome distraction from the chaos of my thoughts. On our first evening, we sat outside by the fire, roasting marshmallows and reminiscing about our favorite memories together. Remember that time we got lost on our hiking trip? Allie laughed, recalling the hilariously wrong turn we had taken. Of course, we ended up on that ridiculous trail, I chuckled, feeling lighter. But we made it an adventure. As the flames crackled and the stars twinkled above us, I realized that moments like these were what mattered most. My relationship with Allie was my priority, and I needed to let go of the anger that was threatening to consume me. The next morning, we hiked a nearby trail, the crisp mountain air invigorating my spirit. As we climbed, I took the opportunity to share my feelings with Allie. I've realized that I need to stop letting Paul's actions control my emotions. I can't keep holding on to that anger. Allie smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. That's a huge realization. Letting go doesn't mean you're excusing his behavior, it means you're choosing to prioritize your happiness. I want to focus on our relationship, I said, determination filling my voice. We've built something beautiful, and I don't want past pain to overshadow that. After our hike, we returned to the cabin, feeling refreshed and connected. That evening, we sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. I took Allie's hand, feeling grateful for her unwavering support. I love you, I said sincerely. Thank you for being my anchor during this storm. I'm ready to keep moving forward, together. I love you too. Allie replied, squeezing my hand. We'll face whatever comes our way, one step at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a renewed sense of hope. I might still have unresolved feelings about Paul, but I was determined to navigate my healing journey alongside Allie. Together, we were building a love that could weather any storm, and I was ready to embrace whatever the future held. The weekend getaway worked wonders for us, and as we returned home, I felt a renewed sense of clarity. However, the reality of everyday life crept back in, and I knew we still had work to do in rebuilding trust. Not just in our relationship but also within myself as I confronted the remnants of my feelings about Paul. The following week, I suggested we dedicate our next online course session to the topic of rebuilding trust in relationships. It felt like a fitting opportunity for us to explore the subject not only as educators but also as a couple who had faced betrayal and were now actively working to rebuild what had been broken. Trust is such a critical component in any relationship, I explained to Allie as we prepared our materials. And I think our experiences can provide valuable insights for our students. Absolutely, Allie agreed, her enthusiasm palpable. We can share our story and the strategies we've used to regain trust in each other. It'll resonate with many people. On the day of the session, we logged in to find a familiar group of participants eager to engage. As we welcomed everyone, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This was a chance to not only share our journey but also to facilitate a meaningful discussion. Today, we're focusing on rebuilding trust, I began, looking around at the faces on the screen. We've all faced situations where trust has been broken, whether through betrayal or miscommunication. The good news is that trust can be rebuilt, but it takes time, effort, and a commitment from both partners. Allie chimed in, it's important to recognize that rebuilding trust is a process. It doesn't happen overnight, and it requires vulnerability and open communication. We opened the floor for discussion, inviting participants to share their own experiences. A man named David spoke up first. I had a trust issue in my last relationship where my partner lied about something significant. I've struggled with trusting again since then. That's completely understandable, David, I replied. When trust is broken, it can leave deep scars. What steps have you taken to begin rebuilding that trust? David paused, clearly reflecting on his journey. I've been trying to be more open and honest with myself about my feelings, but I still find it hard to trust others. Allie offered, building self-trust is just as important as trusting others. It starts with being honest with yourself about what you need and what your boundaries are. As the conversation continued, several participants shared their stories of betrayal, anger, and the challenges of rebuilding trust. Each story added a layer of complexity to the discussion, highlighting the deep emotional toll that broken trust can take. Toward the end of the session, I felt compelled to share our own experience. I think it's crucial for us to acknowledge that rebuilding trust is not just about the person who betrayed. It's also about the one who was hurt, I said, my voice steady. Allie and I have been on this journey together, and it's required both of us to be committed to the process. Allie nodded, her expression encouraging. For me, it was about creating a safe space where we could communicate openly. I had to be willing to listen to John's feelings without becoming defensive, even when it was painful to hear. I continued, one key aspect for us has been setting clear boundaries and expectations. Trust is built on consistency, and we both had to work hard to follow through on what we promised to each other. The session wrapped up with a sense of camaraderie among the participants. Many expressed gratitude for the space we had created, where they could share their vulnerabilities and learn from one another. After the meeting, Allie and I reflected on the impactful discussions. I think we really helped some people today, she said, her eyes sparkling with pride. Sharing our journey seemed to resonate with them. I agree, I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest. It's a powerful reminder that healing is possible, and we're not alone in this journey. As the days turned into weeks, we continued to focus on rebuilding trust in our relationship. We implemented our check-in sessions, dedicating time each week to discuss our feelings, address any concerns, and reaffirm our commitment to one another. During one of these sessions, I brought up something that had been on my mind. I've been thinking about how we can further strengthen our trust, I said, looking into Allie's eyes. What if we both create a list of actions that help us feel secure in our relationship? Allie's face lit up, That's a great idea. We can identify specific behaviors that reinforce our trust and communicate our needs more effectively. We spent the next hour crafting our lists, highlighting small actions that made us feel loved and secure. For me, it was simple things like regular check-ins, expressing appreciation, and maintaining transparency about our feelings. For Ali, it included open communication and creating time for each other amidst our busy schedules. As we shared our lists, I felt a sense of excitement about the path ahead. These actions may seem small, but they can make a huge difference in how we build trust moving forward. I completely agree, Ali said, her smile radiating warmth. These are tangible steps we can take to nurture our relationship. As the weeks passed, I felt a shift in our dynamic. Our commitment to rebuilding trust fostered an environment where we could be vulnerable with each other. We navigated challenges together, supporting one another with compassion and understanding. However, one evening, a text from Lisa caught me off guard. She had messaged to ask if I was okay, expressing concern about my reaction to Paul's recent social media posts. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. Why were people still bringing him up? Are you all right? Ali asked, sensing my agitation as I stared at my phone. It's just Lisa checking in again, I said, annoyance creeping into my voice. I don't want to keep talking about Paul. I thought I had moved past this. I understand, but maybe it's an opportunity to express that you're focusing on your healing and your relationship with me, Ali suggested. It could help set boundaries around the topic. Quote. After a moment of contemplation, I nodded. You're right. I'll let her know that I appreciate her concern, but I'm working on moving forward. I drafted a message, expressing my gratitude for her concern but also emphasizing my desire to focus on my healing journey and relationship with Ali. Hitting send felt like another step toward reclaiming my narrative. Later that evening, as we snuggled on the couch watching a movie, I felt a wave of contentment wash over me. The trust we were rebuilding was palpable, and I knew I was on the right path. Thank you for being my partner in this, I said, looking at Ali. Your support means everything to me. I'm here for you, always, she replied, leaning in for a kiss. As we settled into the warmth of each other's presence, I felt hopeful about the future. We had faced the storm together, and as we continued to rebuild trust, I knew we were creating a love that could withstand any challenge life threw our way. Together, we were stronger than ever. As I continued to rebuild my relationship with Alice, I realized I needed to finally talk to Paul. This wasn't out of anger but rather to find closure. I decided to write him a letter, sharing my feelings and explaining how his actions affected me and Alice. A few days later, I received his response. He acknowledged my feelings but remained cold, showing no responsibility for his actions. I felt I wouldn't get the acknowledgement I sought, but I no longer depended on it for my healing. Alice and I focused on our future together. I suggested we create a vision board to express our dreams and goals. This helped us strengthen our bond and see the many possibilities ahead. In the end, I realized I could let go of the past and focus on what truly mattered. I thanked Alice for her support, and we decided together that we could handle any challenges that came our way.